So we're welcoming Georgia Donaldson to our virtual lectern. She's known for her balanced approach to human resource management and development, and she has served several organizations throughout the Caribbean, both private and public sectors and in diverse industries. She has over 20 years experience moving through the ranks up to the executive level in various industries. She has dedicated her career to empowering individuals and organizations through her facilitation, training, coaching, human resource management, and business psychology services. She is the founder of Corporate Options. It's an HR consulting firm in Trinidad. She's lived, what, 17 years? She is a certified mediator. She's accredited by the Mediation Board of Trinidad and Tobago. She's also a behavioral coach and holds the prestigious Senior Certified Professional designation from SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. Her academic credentials include a master's degree in business psychology and a bachelor's degree in management studies. She's an active member of the Human Resource Management Association of Trinidad and Tobago. She serves on boards of Girls of Impact, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Farquharson Institute of Public Affairs, where she's the Global Vice President, People Development. She's also a former director of the Association of Female Executives in Trinidad and Tobago. Individuals and organizations who solicit her services can look forward to a blend of impactful and relevant content sparkled with fun activities. So we know that is what we're about to get here this afternoon as we welcome Georgia Donaldson to the HRD family. So, oh dear.
Thank you very much, Olivine.
Nice.
I think you just took half of the time for the presentation with that introduction. But I'm hoping we still have people online after they listen to that.
I'm sure that the numbers will grow. They'll be calling their friends.
Yes. Okay, good. So are you all seeing the presentation?
Yes, but it's not in slideshow mode.
It's not in slideshow. Okay, I thought that from current slide. Okay, they're seeing it now?
Yes, everything cool now.
Right, wonderful. Good. So good afternoon. Do we have what, ladies and gentlemen, or is it just ladies? Do we have gentlemen in the group? Or is it just ladies?
I'm not seeing any gentlemen right now.
Okay.
We had some earlier. Maybe they'll come back.
Okay, all right. So your HR program, you do have men.
Yes, we do. And they've been here until, up to the previous presentation. We had some.
Okay. All right, good. Because I know traditionally, right across the Caribbean region, most of our HR professionals are women. So I'm always looking out for men when I do presentations. But ladies, you're important, and I'm happy that you are here. I'm happy that I was asked to come to talk to you about the HR policies, and really and truly, what are HR policies? Why do we need them? And what is the future of HR policies? So let's jump right into it. Now, HR policies are powerful tools, and these tools help to do several things. So in particular, I thought I would bring these three to mind first and foremost for you. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is HR policies helping to protect employees. And then HR policies as a guide to leaders. So your HR professionals in your organizations, your supervisors, your managers, all persons in managerial and leadership roles. And then now your HR policies as it starts to help you now to shape your workplace culture. So let's break that down a little bit. So when we're talking about an HR policy being a tool to protect employees, we're talking about the clauses in those HR policies which speak to what are the rights and privileges for employees. And when we're talking about HR policies as a guide to leaders, we're talking about situations that leaders might find themselves in. And they ask questions, what do I do in a situation like this? So for example, if there's underperformance, how do I treat with that situation? If there's a grievance, how do I manage it? How do I handle it? And if there are certain perks and benefits or compensation and benefits, what are the guidelines for those? So that's how it guides leaders. And then when we talk about shaping workplace culture, what really is culture? Culture is how we do things. Everything that we do in an organization forms part of your culture. And so your policy is also part of your culture. Now, if your policy only speaks about the don'ts and it doesn't speak about what we do, then that's a culture that it's developing. So you want to ensure that when you are building your HR policies, that it is shaping the culture that you want for your organization. So I can use an example of an organization that say that people ensure that the policies that you have in your HR manual speak to people as people and valuing people. So I'm hoping that that is clear from the get-go. Now, I know it's difficult when I'm not able to see people to get a sense of, whether or not you're understanding, but you're all seeing me. So you're at the advantage. So let's move on and talk about HR policies and best practices. Now, when we are developing HR policies, we want to ensure that we are meeting HR standards and HR best practices. So when we are devising, creating, and developing policies, we want to make sure that those policies talk about leadership, the kind of leadership that we have or we want in our organization, that it also speaks about the culture of the organization. So most policies you will see early in the policy, there's a section on the organization's mission, the organization's vision, the organization's values. It can also talk about how you operate, the way we work. That's part of your culture. Any policy that's worth its weight in gold will also have something about employee engagement. Your policy also should talk about opportunities that are available to employees. And also, if you are going to be recruited into that organization, it should give you a guide as to whether or not you'll be a good fit for that organization. So your policies, your HR policies should now be abiding by best practices in your HR fraternity and your industry. And when we continue to talk about HR policies, we want to make sure that some of you have seen an HR policy. So here's a quick poll for you. Have you ever seen or read policy or manual? And these are your options. So if you can put that in the chat for me. So yes, if you've read one fully, yes, you've skimmed it, you've skimmed one, or no, you've never seen one. So I just want to get a sense of who is in the room and the experience that you've had with HR policies. So let me just go. Somebody's saying volume is low. I'm just seeing that. Are you all here?
Mine is fine.
Okay, all right. I saw that somebody had put that at 436. So good. Can you now just go in that chat and tell me someone is saying yes, skimmed through a few? Okay. Skimmed through, no, okay. What else? Let's see some of the responses. It gives me an idea of how to pitch the rest of the conversation. Who else? Anybody else sharing? Yes, you've seen. Right. Okay, good. Now I want to get a sense, and someone, CJ Ray, you have your hand up. CJ, how may I help? Do you have a question?
I'm so sorry, that was accidental. But seeing that my mic is open, may I ask, is the policy similar to a constitution of an organization?
No, totally different things.
Okay.
Two different things. So the constitution talks now more about the governance of the organization. Yes.
Okay.
And your policy is more people-centric.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, good. All right. So yes, somebody else is saying that they have skimmed it. So I want to get a sense of the positioning of the people in the room. Are you all full-time students or are some of you working in organizations? So if you could just drop in the chat again for me, maybe just say full-time student or employed. Let's see what's coming up in the chat. Full-time employee, employed. Okay, good. So here's the correlation that I'm trying to make. if those of you who are employed are the ones that said, yes, you've read one or you've skimmed one. So I'm hoping that's the case, because I'm hoping that the organizations that you're employed with have HR policies in place. So raise your hand, put your hand up if the company that you're working with has an HR manual. Because the HR manual now is a composite of lots of HR policies. So I'm seeing some hands going up. Yes, okay. Kamisha, I saw your hand. Let me just go to participants. Yes, anybody else? Hand going up? I saw a couple of other hands. Good, so there is some appreciation for HR policies. You've seen it, you've skimmed it, maybe you've read a little of it. Good, so we can jump right in. So you may ask yourself this question, why HR policies? Why do we bother? Why do organizations bother to have HR policies? Because it is time consuming to develop policies. I can tell you from experience. You heard Olivine reading my profile, and it took her quite a while. It kind of tells you how many years I've been in HR. And I might just whisper that I've been in HR for 30 years. So I have seen a policy or two, and I've designed and developed a policy or two. And over the years, I have seen where not having an HR policy has caused many problems for organizations. They have run afoul of the law, and they have also done disservice to their employees. So why HR policies? They are a critical part of the organization's strategy. So any organization that wants to be an employer of choice should have HR policies. And particularly if you have an organizational strategy, if you go through a strategy session and you've come out of that strategy session saying you want to position yourself as an employer of choice, you must have some HR policies, because that's going to guide your operations of your people. And these HR policies, they don't just tell people what to do. The HR policies that we're talking about are the ones now that define the environment and define the culture. So the policies you're writing are saying what are the behaviors and what are the standards and what are the expectations of employees, of supervisors, of managers and leaders, and sometimes even other stakeholders. So some policies I know, for example, yes, someone making a contribution? No? Okay, good. So some policies I know, for example, like in an NGO, a non-governmental organization, they also have in their HR policy clauses on partners and volunteers and so on. So depending on the stakeholders who you're dealing with, your HR policy can also be extended to deal with other stakeholders. And when you think of your HR policies, think of it as your company's operating system. And where is that terminology coming from? Anybody who wants to hazard a guess, who wants to tell me? The operating system. Where is that coming from? Where did I borrow that from? Anybody who wants to mute yourself, unmute and tell me. What's the operating system?
From electronics, from machines.
Yes, from technology. Yes, yes. So that is a system that guides a lot of your different parts, putting pieces together. So if you think of your HR policy as that operating system for your people management in your organization, you'll want to ensure that you're capturing all the elements, the people elements in your organization. So essentially, HR policies are guidelines. They help to make sure that you have standards. They talk about what are you doing to represent people, and they also act as your reference point for your leaders in your organization. Now, as we move on to talk a little further about HR policies, let us consider this case. So I want you to take a minute to look at that case. Take a minute to read it, and then we're going to have a conversation around it. All right. Give me a thumb up if you've read it. Ready to go for a conversation? I want you to see this talk not just as me talking, but thank you. So we're having a conversation. So picture it, this is a small tech company, and they have decided that they're going to have their people work remotely. But one major thing they didn't do, they didn't create a formal policy around remote work. So a few months in, they recognize that they're having difficulties, they're having challenges. And without a policy, there's no guideline now for the situations that crop up. And here's where I involve you. I want you to think of this company. Think of this policy. So there's this decision to have people work remotely, but no policy was put in place. What do you think are some of the situations that may arise because there was no written policy? So if you want to drop some things in the chat, or anybody who wants to unmute, and let's have a conversation around it. What do you think can arise, some situations, if there's no policy in place?
Hi, my name is Shakira, and
Hi, Shakira.
hello. And one of the things that come to mind would be some staff members deciding to work longer than usual or starting later than usual. So if your set time to start in the office is usually 8:30 a.m., give or take, sometimes, we all come late, so it's between 8:30 and 9. But
Yes.
now when you're working from home, you find yourself signing in to Microsoft Teams or to sign in through Zoom or any other platform, right? Around 10, 11 o'clock. Now, that's not the norm for you, because by right, when you are here face to face, you are always here at 8:30, between 8:30 and 9. Why is it now that in remote work, you can't maintain that level of discipline?
Yes.
So discipline is a problem with staff members that are not normally used to in remote work, and they abuse it.
Okay.
And then that's
Wonderful.
why, so this is why a chaos would erupt now, because if you did not put that policy, that blueprint in place to say, listen, this is what we will accept, this is what we will not accept, this is what is right, this is what is wrong. So as a result, now, if it didn't do that, then we're going to have to suffer the consequences now, and then we have to just probably take it person by person, as probably have them set in a meeting to discuss their discrepancies.
All right. Wonderful, Shakira. You are spot on. So there was no guideline set in motion for timeliness, start, end time, and what are the expectations around that? If you're supposed to be logging in at a certain time, what are the times for breaks and so on? No expectation was set for that. I saw somebody said deadlines and deliverables. Yes, very important. What about workspace, safety? Because you're working from home, you do not want liability now being placed on the organization. God forbid you were to trip over a cord. So what are the occupational safety and health standards that you're setting in a policy to ensure that people are abiding by those things? Somebody saying each person will create their own structure. Yes, that suits them. And this may affect productivity or the typical operations of the business. There could be blurred lines with boundaries as well. Yes, supervisors calling after work hours. Yes, very important. So you see, if you have a policy guideline in place, people will understand what the expectations are. So you avoid all of these situations cropping up. Now, naturally, you're not going to capture every single element that can happen, every situation that could arise. But you want to ensure that you have a robust policy that will capture most of the situations that most organizations would face from time to time. So thank you so much for your contribution. So that's one case to consider. Now, let us move a little further and think of perspectives. When we're talking about HR policies, we're looking at certain perspectives, and two main perspectives we're viewing policies from the employee perspective and from the HR professional's perspective. And what do employees want to know? Most importantly, they want to know what's in it for them. So what is this policy saying about me? What is this policy saying for me? What is this policy doing for me? So that's one of the main things employees want to know. Then the HR professional. The HR professional now has a responsibility to ensure that the right clauses are in the policy to cover, safeguard the organization, and also make sure that the employee's interest is taken into account. So always think of that. if you're going to be given the responsibility of drafting or crafting HR policies, then I think it's important for you to think of the perspectives that you're likely to face. What's the employee asking about in the HR policies, and what are the HR professionals talking about in policies? Now, I want you to think of your own perspective. Think of yourself as an employee, and you are now in an organization that is going to be introducing a new HR policy manual. I want you to think about one policy, one category that you want to ensure that is included in that HR policy. So think for a minute. So you put on your hat now as an employee. As an employee, if there's nothing else in the policy, I want to see this in the policy. What would that be for you? Anybody who wants to unmute, or you can drop it in the chat. So this is from your perspective as an employee.
I would say enhance employee relations.
Enhanced employee relations. Excellent. Excellent.
So that would basically encompass policies defining employee rights and responsibilities,
yes,
which would then promote a positive and more respectful work environment.
Excellent. And usually in policies, that takes up a big chunk of the policy.
Yeah.
Great. Anybody else wants to share? Think of yourself as an employee. What would you want to see in your HR policy? How many persons do we have online? We have 15, including me, including Olivine. So we have at least 13 others. What else? You're in an organization
Something from
now.
the sexual harassment policy itself.
Aha, that's a great one. That's a great one. And lots of policies do not have that. So that is jumping off of the, was that a session you had earlier today? Did you have that? Or
no, not sexual harassment. No.
Okay. All right, good. So that's a great one. Anybody else?
Health benefits.
Health, your benefits, your compensation and benefits.
Right.
Yes, that ought to be an important section in your HR policy. And I see Kristen has put data privacy as an important one as well. Thank you so much for sharing. So that is your perspective as an employee. Now, I want you to drop yourself in the shoe of the HR manager for an organization. As an HR manager, you want to ensure that your policy includes what? One thing, if nothing else.
Legal compliance.
Legal compliance.
Legal compliance, yeah,
Yes.
where HR policies will help any organization really to adhere to employment laws and regulations.
Yes.
Reducing the risk of lawsuits and penalties.
There you go. There you go. And that's who? That's Shakira again?
Yeah.
Thank you, Shakira. Good.
You're welcome.
So very important. So as an HR professional, you want to ensure that the policy manual that you are crafting and creating is standing up to your legal documentation. So whether it's your laws, your regulations, your industry standards, all of those things, you want to ensure that you're capturing that in your HR policy.
And protecting the organization, because that's our role, you know,
For
at the
sure.
end of the day.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then I saw in the chat that mental health was one. As an employee, you wanted that perspective as well to be seen in your HR policy. Very important. And you will see towards the end of this presentation, when we start looking now at future-focused HR policies, that's one of the key things that we want to talk about. Good. So let's take another step further and at 3 pillars, 3 basic pillars. When you're writing an HR policy manual and you're writing HR policies, you want to look at these three things. You want to ensure that in your HR policies, you're capturing your risk management responsibility. You want to ensure that you're capturing your culture building responsibility. And you also want to ensure that there's fairness and compliance. And Shakira, you mentioned that. So let's jump a little into them now. So under risk management, what are we talking about? And you said it. You preempted and you said that we're protecting the company because you want to make sure that you're not putting the company up risk legally, any risk financially, and you want to ensure that we're complying now with all of the labor laws and the regulations. So that's one bucket that you want to ensure that you're capturing and you're covering when you are designing and developing your HR policies. Is that clear for everyone? And do you accept that? Yeah, let me see.
Yes,
Give me
definitely,
give me some
definitely.
love in the chat or some emojis. Everybody agreeing with that one? That's one important bucket that we need to capture. Good. So let's fill that bucket. I see the hearts going up. Excellent. Now, some people waver on this one, but as a seasoned HR professional, I say to other HR professionals, make sure that you are taking culture into account when you're dealing with your HR policy. So you want to establish your norms for the behavior that you want to see in your organization. You want to make sure that you are creating a fair and consistent policy, and that it's a positive workplace, a place where people want to come and they want to stay. And how are you doing that? We're talking about the things that people do in the day-to-day, the behaviors, the interactions, and all of the things that you see go on in organizations from day to day. So your policies are capturing what it is that people are living in the organization. So that's another key bucket. And let me tell you something, many times when we have confrontations and conflicts that we have to mediate in organizations, this is the bucket where we have most of the issues. So when supervisors and managers say they have to talk to people about their behavior and how they interact with other people, lots of issues there. When we hear people talking about the dress code and people are not conforming to the dress code, this is where it falls. When we hear heavy-handed managers and leaders who are treating people badly, this is where it falls. So the bulk of our problems in organizations, many times when there's an absence of the standards and expectations in the culture building, this is where it stems from. So good, so that's the second pillar we spoke about. Let's talk about this other pillar now regarding fairness and compliance. So we want as much as possible to guarantee that employees are treated right, treated fairly, and treated equitably. So regardless of their role. So if the employee is a tea lady, if the employee is a supervisor, or if the employee is the CEO of the organization, he or she ought to be treated fairly. He or she ought to be treated equitably, no matter your role or your status in the organization. And it doesn't matter who you report to as well. So if you report to the service manager, you should not have better treatment than if you report to the operations manager. So regardless of who you report to and what level in the organization you are, you should have the same level of treatment. Now, how many of you have been in organizations where you see the disparity and the differences and the inequities of people being treated badly or treated differently because of their position in the organization? Have you seen that? Anybody, a raise of hand, or anybody who wants to unmute and talk about it? Have you seen it? Because the person was a janitor, they didn't get the respect. Yes, Carmen, would you like to unmute and just share something? Carmen? You just raised your hand, so you just want to say that you've seen it. Anybody else that you've seen that?
I can't say that I've seen it, but I do recall that at the University of the West Indies, they had different ID cards depending on which section, which you work. So WIGOT, people in WIGOT are the professors, the lecturers, and the senior management. They had red ID cards that were portrait. People who were in Monasa, in the admin scale, they had blue ID cards, the sort of blue that you have here on the side. And people who were in the ancillary, like they had ID cards that were portrait, that were landscape and in red. And I remember when the Monats people, so that the people who were the admins, they said that it was discriminatory for them to have a different color ID card for the lecturers and the senior management people. And the university changed it, and now everybody has the same ID card, which is the ID card that the lecturers and senior management always had. No, the truth is, I had a red ID card. So I didn't see, but when I came here, I was a blue ID card person when I just came to the university. I didn't feel discriminated against. I really didn't feel discriminated. And I didn't have a problem. I never thought about it. But the fact is that it became a union matter. It became
Look
a
at that.
union matter at the university. And so the management made everybody know
And they
has
changed it.
the red ID card, yeah.
Right.
But
Okay.
that was in the 2000s. It was in the 2000s.
Okay.
Because I was in sociology department when that happened.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that, Olivine. And you know that could have gone different ways.
Yes,
Because
yeah.
depending on how it was introduced, it could have been different. Because if they had said that there was a color coding system based on A, B, and C, so people understood what a color meant, or they could have said that blue is recognizing this faculty, blue recognizes this faculty, red recognizes another faculty, depending on how it's done. But maybe no communication was had around it so that people did not feel that there was inequity. So it's very important anytime we are building a culture, we understand exactly what we're doing and we're sharing the information so people do not leave with their own interpretation of it. So thanks for sharing. Good. So those are the pillars that we want to focus on when we're talking about our HR policies. So we want to ensure that risk management is taken care of. You want to ensure that you're building the right culture, and you want to ensure that there's a great level of fairness and equity. So here's poll number 2. Name one important section you think should be in an HR policy manual. We had asked a question earlier, and some people had answered. Is there any other that you didn't answer that you think you want to make sure you put now? Any section. So somebody mentioned mental health and one on grievances, disability.
Legal department.
What's that?
Well, I mentioned the legal compliance, so that will represent the
Yes.
legal department.
Right. So is there any other, now that we're starting the conversation, is there any other that anybody else would want to add? Gender, benefits, definitely.
Oh, yeah,
You can't have a solid policy without information on your compensation and benefits. Diversity, excellent. And you're going now into the future focus because many policies now do not have anything on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Management of disciplinary matters, very important. Good. So it tells me that you're thinking more about it as we continue the conversation. You're thinking more about the different things that will make a solid HR policy. All right, so let's look at this. I gave you those 3 pillars. I'm also saying to you, in addition to those 3 pillars, you want to look at the employee life cycle when you are developing a policy. And if you've not been introduced to the employee life cycle before, let's talk about it. How many of you have been introduced to the HR, to the employee life cycle? I'm seeing here leave and time off work. Yes, very good. That's another one to be included. So by a show of hands, have you been introduced to the concept of the employee life cycle? Shakira, you're saying yes? Anybody else?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else introduced to the yes? Kamisha? Who else? Is this part of the program that you're doing? Is this part of your content, your course content? The employee life cycle?
Apparently not. Apparently not. But
somebody's saying indirectly. All right.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things, if you leave with nothing else, folks, on this talk, when you leave here, I want you to go and do some research on the employee life cycle. You are not going to be a successful and effective HR professional if you don't have a good grasp of the employee life cycle. So let me break it down this way for you. Think of your own life. You're born, you become a toddler, then you move into your early, before your teens, your early teens, then you go to college, you get married, you have kids, if that's what you want to do, you move on, you work, then you retire. That's your life cycle. Then God forbid, you pass away. But we all have to die to leave here, right? At some point in time. So you're going through your life cycle. Employees have a similar life cycle. And the life cycle starts when you are recruited, you're attracted and recruited into the organization. So your life cycle with the organization starts there when you come into the organization. So you're attracted and then you're recruited into that organization. And then when you are now in that organization, you go through some onboarding, orientation and onboarding. And then you go through some development. So there's learning and development. Then you have your performance management and their rewards and recognition. So many things, succession planning that helps you to be integrated into the organization. And then there comes a time when you decide that maybe I want to leave. I want to go to Canada. I want to migrate to Trinidad as I did. You want to do something else. There's another company that you think is a better fit for you. Or, God forbid, the company fires you. That's another separation as well. But you go through that life cycle. So the tip I'm giving you is that when you're writing your HR policy, follow that life cycle. And if you follow that life cycle, you'll be able to identify the different clauses that will meet each stage of the employee life cycle. Tell me if you appreciate that. I want to hear some voices in the room. Tell me if you appreciate that. So in addition to making sure that you know those 3 buckets we spoke about, it's also important that you are identifying the employee life cycle. So anybody appreciates that? You see that as an easy way to guide you to write the policy?
Yeah, because it set the stage. So it's just the perfect,
yes,
it's
yes.
the real life cycle. It's the perfect stages of what a typical life of an employee is.
Yes, yes. And that helps you now to journey along with that employee. So what are some of the things that the employee is likely to face? So when the person is recruited, what are the expectations? During the onboarding, what should the person expect? Is there a checklist? And what are some of the things that will happen during the onboarding period? So for example, if your probationary period is 3 months, the employee needs to know that during those 3 months, they're going to be assessed. Their performance will be assessed. And your policy should speak to the process for that assessment. If there are training opportunities, your policy should speak to that as well. If there are retention and strategies to hold you as an employee, your policy should speak to that. Is there a reward and recognition program? All of those things. And if you decide to leave, so suppose you get to retirement age, what's the process and the procedure for you to move into retirement? So that's now just telling you how you are making sure that you're capturing everything along the journey for the employee in your organization. And if you want, you can take a photo of this so that you get a sense of what you're dealing with when you're looking at your employee life cycle. Good. So let's move on again. So let's talk now about moving a little into recruitment and selection as part of your employee life cycle. So if you were to look at an HR policy and on the segment called recruitment and selection, you should be able to see some highlights there of how people are attracted, how you attract candidates into your organization, and what are your recruitment methodologies. What are your standards? People who are employees already in the organization and their internal job postings. What are the expectations? Do you first post about the job internally, externally? That's something that you'd capture as well in your HR policy. So people are aware of what the expectations are. And what about the recruitment process? What's the information on the recruitment process? So these are just 3 simple highlights that I'm giving you of some of the things that you would see under a section in your HR policy talking about recruitment and selection. If we're to talk about orientation and onboarding, how many of you have experienced orientation and onboarding in your organization? Tell me, do you have a formal onboarding session or a formal orientation session? Have you experienced that? Anyone online who has experienced that?
Yes, good evening, Carmen here. Yes, for my
Hi,
department,
Carmen.
we have a 8 weeks orientation onboarding process for my departmental staff.
Really?
So yes, you do. Yes.
8 weeks. That is
Yes,
comprehensive.
ma'am. to make sure that they are fit and ready for the job.
Oh, wow. Is this a technical field?
Yes, it is a clinical.
This is where?
Clinical field. So it's in a hospital.
Clinical.
It's in a hospital.
Wow, wonderful. So 8 weeks. Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you. And Kamisha is saying yes. So
You
some
you
persons
put
are
one in
aware.
after I pass that stage, but Yui does have one. But
We has one as
yes,
well.
and they have it
Okay,
at different
great.
stages. So, for instance, if you're going in as a head of department, you have a thing. If you're coming in as a lecturer, it's a different thing from what the head of department would be doing.
Right.
If you're going in as a
Yes.
dean, it's a different training from the head of department. Or
Yes.
so they have several actually.
Right. Good. And there are certain basic things that everyone will have. And then based on the position now, you will have some tailoring of it. Very good. So that's your orientation and onboarding. So your HR policy should speak to that. Listen, this is the one where employers will go ballistic if they don't see it. So your compensation and benefits, because that's why I'm here. I came to work because there are certain benefits and there is certain compensation that I thought I would be getting in this organization. So your policy ought to outline those benefits. So for example, if the company offers uniforms, they should tell you if you're getting 5 uniforms every 18 months or every 2 years, whatever it is, the cycle is for that organization. If you become eligible for life and group health insurance or accidental death and dismemberment insurance, what's the eligibility for that? If after 3 months you're confirmed, what are the things that you are supposed to get as part of your compensation and benefits package? So if your organization gives a bonus, it should be there. If there are allowances, it should be there. And if there's overtime pay, it should be there. So these are just a few bullets that I'm putting just to give you an idea, a little snippet of what you're likely to see in a compensation and benefits section of an HR policy. So let's talk about performance management. This is the one where we have lots of issues many times because people have different views on performance management and how it's to be conducted. There's some organizations where when you're doing a performance appraisal, they ask you to rate yourself first, and then your manager would sit with you and go through your performance rating. Other organizations don't do it that way. So it depends on the organization which you're employed. So people need to know what's the process. What are the forms? There should be forms accompanying your HR policy manual so people can readily see the forms, like your vacation leave forms, your performance appraisal form, and so on. What are the different roles and responsibilities for people in the performance management process? But not only that, roles and responsibilities generally throughout the HR policy. And this one I know in particular for managers, excuse me, managers and supervisors, how do they manage underperformance? So this is a sticky area many times that people do not understand. And if there's not clear guidance, it can go awry. So any question on this one so far? Performance management? No? All right, so let's move on a little bit. And there's another area here in your policy development, learning and development. So if there are training opportunities, or what are the guidelines for people to get training? What are the standard operating procedures in the organization? And how can people be promoted? Some policies are deficient when they leave these things out because you want to ensure that you are engaging your employees and you are retaining your employees. So you want to ensure that you're including things like this in your HR policy. Let's take a look at another one. This is engagement and retention. And I'm stopping here for a second for you to look at that. Now think of your own organization that you work in. Do you recall seeing policies and procedures on safety and health? Can any of you recall? Anybody who wants to share?
Yeah, for in particular.
Yes, Shakira, go ahead.
Yeah, in particular with you and Mono, from time to time there is a department called OESH. I think it's Occupational and Safety Health, if I'm not mistaken.
And environment.
Yeah, and environmental health, yeah, which is based between HR and the Faculty of Science and Technology, and they will usually make memos geared towards the campus community, whether it's staff or students or both of us, indicating us like the do's and don'ts if there is a case of a fire in a classroom or in an office or whatever the case may be. So it's like a safeguard pamphlet just to tell us what we need to do in the case of a storm or an earthquake. So yes, so we because we don't have a bulletin on the campus or like a bullhorn to like, announce.
Okay, yes, and that's a big campus. That's a huge
Precisely.
Right.
Over 600 acres of land, LOL. But I mean, the only means of us getting information across is usually through an email blast, which will come in the form of Mona messaging system, or it could be a case where using social media, because UE's different faculties and platforms and departments all have like IG and Facebook pages. So they will utilize that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Is
They
there any
have they have other safety things too. For instance, we had a student fall and break an arm. We've had 2 students in the last year fall and break arms, and there's a procedure. We had to learn what to do, but you have to tell the health center, you have to tell the police, you have to tell all kinds of people and sign off on all sorts of things and bring witnesses. They have all sorts of things for that. And the director of the clinical thing becomes really involved, the director of clinical services on the campus. So they have that. They're very serious about that.
And here's why I stopped at this one, because too often HR people, HR professionals, and other policy designers think that it's only large organizations need to have policies on health and safety. It does not matter the size of the organization. Whether or not you have a huge space or a small space, as long as you have people working in your organization, you have a responsibility for their safety and their health and their well-being at work. Yes, Suzanne, you have your hand up. You have a question, Suzanne?
Oh, okay, sorry. Good day. I was also saying that the university also has some forms on their HR website. So if you see things like you can report things that may cause accidents or pose a problem, they have accident report forms and those stuff that we can preempt these things and, mitigate against them.
Right. So possible hazards.
Right.
Right. Okay, excellent. Thanks for that contribution. Yes. So the point is, folks, when you move into industry and if you're working in a small organization and you're going to be the HR professional in that organization, do not think that because the organization is small, it's an office with 10 persons, that you do not need to put safety and health policies in place. You need to. And there's an occupational safety and health act, I'm sure, in Jamaica. When I left Jamaica, I remember it was developed. So I'm sure it's full-fledged now. So you need to ensure that you are you're conforming to what is in that occupational safety and health legislation. Good. So we come to separation. Remember, we're going through the employee life cycle, and your policy ought to speak on separation. So you want to make sure that it's well established and documented, the process, the procedure. And it doesn't matter if your separation is voluntary or involuntary. You need to state what the procedures are. Have a separation checklist in your HR policy so people know at a glance what are the things that they need to do. So if I'm going to retire in 6 months before my retirement, this is something I need to do, or this is something the company will do for me. And when I'm leaving, I should expect that there's going to be an exit interview. So all of these are things that you should make sure you have in your HR policy. So if you recognize that we have just gone through the employee life cycle, seeing how we can position and structure each of those segments in your HR policy. So here's one thing I want to ask you now, a quick poll again. So on a scale of 1 to 3, how important do you think it is for a workplace to have HR policies?
4, extremely important.
Somebody saying 4, off the chart. So let's see what you're dropping in the chat. So far, Kristen is saying 3 is very important. Yes. Anybody else? Anybody thinks that it's somewhat important? And no judgment here. Whatever number you put, we can talk about it. So far I've seen 3. Everybody's saying that 3. What else? Anybody else? How many persons we still have with us? 15 persons are on. 3, it is very important. And I agree, it is very important because yes, CJ is saying 3, Kamisha, Carmen, everybody. So far, everybody has said 3. It's very important. And therefore, when you think of your role as the HR professional who is charged with the responsibility of developing the HR policies, the onus is on you to ensure that that document that you're putting together meets the needs of all of your stakeholders. So it meets the needs of the employees and it meets the needs of the persons who have to uphold those policies and procedures, your supervisors, your managers, your leaders. So you want to ensure that you're capturing all of those, your stakeholders and their needs. All right, so we're coming down to the wire, folks. So let me close this. So let's talk a little bit now about your legal and your compliance best practices. I want you to think of the labor laws and the regulations and the industry standards in Jamaica. You want to ensure that your HR policies and your practices comply with those legal requirements. You want to ensure that you're establishing your proper record keeping and your documentation processes. Now, very important, remember this. When you develop your HR policy and your policy manual and you are disseminating that to your employees, you want to ensure that included in that is an acknowledgement sheet that the employee signs confirming that he or she has received the HR policies. Why do you think we want to have that?
Not only received, but have read the policies.
All right. Okay,
Right.
good.
That's
So it's
the
an
problem for me.
acknowledgement saying I received it, I read it, I understand it, and they're signing and dating it. So Susan, thanks for kicking off that discussion. Why? Why is it important? Just give it to them. Why do they have to sign anything? Tell me, Susan, why?
Yes, mouth make to say anything, you know.
Mouth make to say anything. Yes.
And it's sad because
They start
persons
the
only
company.
seek out the policies when something arises that they need to
Yes.
know. And it's sad
Yes.
because the truth is, if you had known before, you could have preempted a lot of things and save a lot of time. Policies are set not only to protect the employees, but the employers as well. So
Of
we
course.
both need to know what are the measures put in place to protect us both.
Thank
So
you
you
very
don't
much.
just give us, you need to show me. I think policies need to have a way to ensure that the persons do read them, because we get the contract and we sign and we move right along. We never
Yes.
ever look back at these things, and that is the honest truth. You
Yes.
understand me? So I think you must be, if it's even a quiz, do something to show that
Thank you
you
very
read the
much, Susan.
policies.
And you've gone exactly where I wanted to go, because there are some companies now that have a platform. So they have a learning management platform and they put the policy there and they can check the click rate. So when you open the policy, they can know if you have gone through that policy.
Right. I think the other day, the university did, I think it was a workshop on sexual harassment, and you would get a certificate. I think they should do that on the policies.
Yes.
How well do you know your company?
How do you know that you've read it?
So you will force the employer to go and read,
Yes.
even to get the certificate. But
Yes.
we need to know, we need to have them be interested in the policies, because it protects you, the employer, and the employee.
Right. Good. And you've heard the term selective memory?
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
Some employees have been in the business a long time. Some employees have selective memory. Oh, the policy was sent out. Oh, so why I didn't get a copy? Yes. So it's very important that there is some confirmation that they received the policy, that they received it, they read it, they understand it. And as the HR professional with responsibility for HR policy development, you need to have space so people can come and ask questions.
Right.
Often, HR people or our employees are afraid to come to us. They don't want to ask us any questions. They don't trust us, or they don't think that we're competent enough to answer their questions. So folks, I'm talking to you real. I'm giving it to you straight and real, because I've been in this business a long time and I've heard the complaints from employees. So we need to ensure that as the persons with the responsibility for developing those policies, we need to know what we've developed. So when they ask us the questions, we can answer them and we can make sure that we are giving them the information that is necessary. So we want to make sure that we are doing our regular audits of the policies, because policies are living documents. They're not stagnant. They don't sit there like stone. They're not cast in stone. So regularly we should be updating our policies. And I'm not talking about every 6 months. Things are not going to change that rapidly. But you want to make sure that at least every year you check your policy to see if there's anything that needs to be updated. And you want to look now if there was any law, regulation, or compliance requirement that came in after your policy was developed, then you do a cross-referencing to see if your policy still meets the requirements. So very important that you do that. All right, so here's what I want you to do now. Think about this. You are
Sorry, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, sure, Olivine.
You know, with this Me Too thing happening here now, you have standards that existed before. Criminal, yeah, you don't think men should sexually harass women, but essentially men got away with sexually harassing women for decades.
Oh yes.
And then times have changed, the culture, everything has changed, but they're being held accountable for things that happened decades ago when the time really was different.
Yes.
So I'm asking myself, how fair is that? Because a lot of people can genuinely say that this is what used to happen everywhere. I didn't see anything wrong. So I mean, I'm not advocating people, but I'm wondering about the retroactive, applying
the retroactivity of it.
Yes, I'm looking at that.
What you have to establish, what I think, and that's always a challenge, but what I think is important that we establish was a wrong done. And once we establish that a wrong was done, how are we going to right that wrong?
Okay.
How are we going to make restitution for that wrong? And I think that's where it comes in. So whether it was 2 years ago, whether it was 10 years ago, was a wrong done? Was there a victim? Did someone suffer as a result of your behavior? And if we can answer that yes, then somebody should be paying for that action. So I think that's one of the things that helps us to answer a question like that.
And that's again is where the policy comes in, because when you know the route to take. Personally, I have been involved in situations where I have felt like sexual harassment was on the table. But when I went to persons who are my supervisors or what, I remember being told, sort it out on an adult, deal with it. And I'm like,
can you believe?
But I don't feel like I can deal with this.
Right.
And,
so there was no protection for you.
High above me, there was no protection. And for the most of the time sitting there, every time this person would come, I was literally in fear. And I could not go to my supervisor or my boss and say, because the person is going to the boss. And them laugh and them talk and them say, I'm a big person, deal with it.
Oh my goodness.
And I didn't know how to deal with it.
Yes. I'm so sorry that you work in an organization that would not protect you.
I didn't know how to deal with it.
Yes.
So maybe when the policies come about sexual harassment, I could say, so I take it to this, I take it to that. We are more reactive than proactive. So when the situation where everybody start crying wolf, that's when we get the policies. But we have to preempt where you're gonna come, and these things are gonna come up into institutions. Get them out there, because there are people like even me. So suppose I was to succumb and that, you have persons who have to go through this thing daily. And can't do anything because the mouth is at home.
Unfortunate.
The job is important. You need a job, and they know you need a job. So
but then your mental health is so important.
Mental health. I mean, I used to disappear literally as the person break the can. I'm gone because I can't depend on nobody for defend. And who I thought would have my back say, you're an adult. This is an adult in the institution. Deal with it.
Oh my goodness. I apologize on behalf of any well-thinking HR professional. That, things like that should never be allowed to happen. And ladies, you are studying HR. And this is a lesson to you when you get into organizations to ensure that this does not continue. You are going to be in a position of influence and power to deal with things like this. So Susan, if we're sorry that happened to you, but what you're going to do is use that now as your platform to make a change and to make an impact when you get into the position of influence as an HR professional.
Noted.
So thank you so much for being open and for being vulnerable enough to share that. All right, so here's where we are. So I want you to identify a labor law that you know of, a regulation or some industry standard that you feel must be referenced in an HR policy manual in Jamaica. So in your studies, are
Overtime.
you talking about laws at all in your studies? Are you talking about legislation in your
Yes.
studies?
Yes.
Excellent. So I heard overtime, yes. So there's an
Overtime and
overtime
night
law.
shift pay. That
Yes,
should be
good.
included.
Right, good. What else? Drop them in the chat if you don't want to unmute and talk about it. Data protection is one. Excellent. What else? Which other? We
Leave.
still have LRIDA, that's the Labor Relations and Industrial Disputes Act.
Yes, we still have that.
You know that one, yes? All of you as HR professionals need to know that one. I've been away from Jamaica for how many years, and LRIDA is still on my lips. I could just say that one
For
quickly.
certain holidays.
You leave, yes, yes. So think of all of those social ones. So your maternity leave, all of those, make sure that those are captured in your HR policy manual. And that you can do a hyperlink in your policy so that people can quickly just click on the link in the policy and go to that document. And that's forward thinking HR policy design.
Based on whatever the government has
Yes.
instituted
Yes.
within that given year.
Yes. So ladies, very important that even when you leave here, start thinking about all of the things that HR should be in compliance with, all of your laws, your regulations, your industry standards, and so on. And if you're in the position now to develop HR policies, make sure that you are including all of those. So we're coming down to the wire. So we spoke about HR policy as we have known them over the years. Let's look now at what future-focused policies will include. So there are some forward-thinking companies that already have some of these in their policies. And some companies that are now catching up are putting in remote work-life integration. They're promoting, work-life integration in their policies. So this is the wave that we're on now. Work-life integration. You're making sure that you have clauses in your policy speaking to that. Then you have remote work. When I think back pre-COVID, not many policies had anything on remote work. And now since COVID, most progressive organizations have clauses on remote work. Look at this one, the use of AI at work, artificial intelligence. If you could show me a policy 5 years ago that had anything on AI, I would say that's a company that was way ahead of everybody else. Most companies are just now putting in policies regarding the use of AI, the ethical use of AI and all of that in their HR policies. So these are 3 to think about. But I also thought of mental health. See, I had that one, Olivine, you mentioned it, and well-being. Many policies never had anything on employee mental health and well-being. And I left 2 spaces for you. So for future-focused policies, can you think of policies or clauses in policies that you may not be seeing in your policies now, in your documents now, that you think ought to be going in them?
Well, one that
I
I think
think
that needs updating is
Social
gender.
media.
You might
Gender,
have things
right?
talking about women, but people don't necessarily see themselves as men or women, or people who look like men might want to be treated the way women, the benefits women get. So that needs to be looked at.
Yes,
How we
yes,
define gender and what we're going to do with people who are not
yes.
what we understood all these years.
And you know, in the Caribbean, we are behind on that.
Mhm.
Yes, somebody else
Another
was
one
going
I
to share?
think they could look at too is, all right, so for the university, you have where you travel. Like when you do overtime, if you're in Kingston, you're paid a certain amount. If you're past the 5 miles mark, you're paid a certain amount. So persons are aware what they had. What I realized in COVID is that we were sent home. And even though they say we can probably do a hybrid work week or something. The truth is, when I am home and I work from 8:30 to 4:30, my light bill reflects something else. So I
Yes,
think the clause need to say persons who work from home 3 days a week, $1,300. So you know that go towards light bill. But I cannot sit with the fan. The computer, everything burning all day for the same thing what I would come and I see. You understand? That's for me.
Yes,
Third class
yes.
needs to say person's working at home 3 days, 1,300. One day, what? Yeah.
I love it, Susan. I love it. Yes. And let me go back to this one. You see that one on the remote work? Those are some things that are captured for some organizations in their policies. If you're working remotely and if you're using additional air conditioning and so on, is there an allowance? Yes, I have seen that already, but not many organizations you're going to see that. Good. Any other one that you want to drop? What's that?
There's also social media.
Yes.
You have to be very careful of what you're posting, especially pretty much any job, really. Any company you're working for, whether it's a blue chip corporate company, a ministry, a university, you are a representation of that company. So you have to be very careful how you post certain materials on your social media pages, because a lot of times you don't realize the importance of your company that you're working for. For example, just this past year, you see JCF have to drape up a lot of the police officers that's going on TikTok, parading with their guns or parading with how they speak with persons, right? JDF had to drape up a lot of the soldiers that are carelessly driving on the roads, and a couple of them passed away from car accidents, and they were videoed. So you see the videoing on your phones and your tablets. It's really it's really one of the things that a lot of the companies are looking back on now, and probably have to start instituting stricter social media rules, especially if you work for the office of the Prime Minister or a university or
regardless of where you work,
like Grace Kennedy or National Bakery, etc. So we have to bear in mind that we can't post everything, and we don't have to personalize everything, right? So there have to be that level of discipline.
So whether you're from a large organization or what you might consider a small, obscure organization, there ought to be some standards with you posting, because people know that you work at that organization and they are going to equate you and your behavior with that organization. Susan, you have another quick one?
Oh, no, I was agreeing with Miss Kane, because I remember once I saw a person, she's a lecturer, who was grading when we had grade from home, and she was frustrated, and she actually posts how frustrated she were with the grades, and she was, look at these nincompoops, and I'm like,
oh my goodness,
I was
inappropriate.
It's inappropriate. So I do agree we have to be careful what we post. We can't just post, because we have to treat everything data protection confidentially. You understand? So I do agree with Ms. Kim.
Thank you so much.
Because you have to protect both the client or the customer, depending on the organization that you're in,
and
right? As well as the company itself.
An ID number is a name, because I'll know my ID number anywhere. So it's a name. So be careful.
I see that Olivine had put paternity leave as one of the things that should be included as well. Yes, thanks so much for that contribution, because you still have companies that do not give paternity leave. So forward-thinking companies are the ones I know now who are including paternity leave in their policies. All right, ladies, so we're coming down to the wire. So is there anything that you do differently after having had this conversation with me this afternoon? So identify one thing you think you would do differently as a result of the information I've shared with you this afternoon. Anything that comes to mind that you think you would do differently?
Exercise HR policies more in like learning the HR policies within my organization more.
That's a great place to start.
Applying it to my everyday living. You know what I mean?
Okay. That's a great place to start, because you know what happens? Oftentimes we work in an organization, we've seen the policy, the document is on a shelf somewhere, it's covered with dust, and we never go back to it.
That's
and we
right.
don't understand our rights and our responsibilities. We spend a lot of time talking about our rights, but we don't spend enough time talking about our responsibilities. So that's a great one. Thanks, Shakira. Anybody else who has not spoken? Who are my other participants who have not spoken? Audra, you still there? CJ? What about Claire? Is there anything you do differently? Kamisha? I hope they haven't fallen asleep on me.
No. I would hold myself and the manager accountable to the
Yes.
HR policies, because sometimes it is there and actions are done and nothing is referred to the policy. So in holding myself and the persons in charge of it, because they too can not abide by it, but to hold each other accountable to the policy.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. And I see Kristen has said that you'd use the employee life cycle technique. I'm glad that resonated with you, Kristen. And I use that for so many different things, the employee life cycle, because that takes you right through the gamut of the employee journey. So every HR professional ought to be aware of the employee life cycle, and you can apply that in so many aspects of your work. So these are my last words, ladies. You want to ensure that you're aligning your HR policies to HR best practice. So always think about that. Always be mindful of the different perspectives. Think about the employee perspective. Think about the perspective of the HR professional. Think about the perspective of the leaders. Essentially, who are your stakeholders and what are their perspectives? And I want us now to think about moving beyond the paper. So your HR policy manual is a bound document or something that, you just have it stapled together. That's the paper. But what's the actual practice? How do you practice what is on the paper as an employee, as an employer? Always be mindful of that. So ladies, I'm hoping that you gained some new information, or even if it were not new for you at this stage, that what I have shared with you maybe reinforced something that you already knew. It really was my pleasure sharing with you. And I look forward to another opportunity, Olivine, that we can talk again on something else, on another matter. Just open the floor now if there's any question.
Wonderful. Yes. Any questions? Any questions? Well,
And
for
if
me,
you'd like,
you
can connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll find me on LinkedIn if you'd like.
Yes, I can share your information. I can share your information. In fact, we can probably just drop it in the chat right here now. But one of the things I am going to do, I'm thinking it through, is that I may well have them watch this video, have the students from one of my assignments is watch the video and come up with, develop a policy. It might not go anywhere beyond my marking, but
that
if
would
not,
be great.
we can go. No, the thing is, what we try to do is do things that could add value to the organizations. So we could do this, develop a policy, and we can see if they're
practical
good
application.
enough. Yes, yeah. So I'm thinking that through.
Right.
And I'm seeing the congratulations in the chat.
Thank you, Kristen. Very informative. It was my pleasure.
Right,
Always happy to share.
Wonderful, wonderful.